seen it before, although it's been a while since it's gotten a lot of wide distribution, I think. There was a sit-in by a group of black students at Cornell in April 1969. They had been asking or demanding from the university, and actually it started out with them, they had some protest earlier, and some black students had been disciplined, and they were concerned about, obtaining amnesty for the actions of those students, but they were also demanding a Black Studies program and various other things that they wanted changed at Cornell. And so they walked in and sat down in Willard Straight Hall at Cornell University. Took over the building on Parents' Weekend and booted out a bunch of parents who there was like I don't know if it was an on-campus hotel, but there were some rooms where parents stayed. And they basically booted everybody out of the building. Now, I think they left at the end of the next day, so it was like one overnight, I think. I'm not recalling precisely. But when they walked out, they were carrying rifles and shotguns and had bandoliers of ammunition across the chest of a couple. That was a pretty stunning photograph. Won the photographer a Pulitzer Prize. Now they had those weapons. They didn't have those weapons when they went in. The reason they had those weapons is because a group of white students had tried to force their way into the building to eject the black students. And so as a matter of self-defense, those black students armed themselves. The effect was just incredible. That photograph of those black students emerging from Willard Straight Hall carrying guns on a major university campus just, it was incredible, the impact. It was seen all across the nation. Now, they were not the first black students to demand a Black Studies program at the university, nor were they the only ones to occupy a campus building. But that image, that photograph, cemented in the public consciousness a connection between Black Studies and extremist rebellion. That connection was reinforced by the fact that student protesters of both races, and on a whole range of subjects, regularly spoke of revolution and engaged in rhetorical violence, talk about smashing the system or tearing down the wall. Journalists, meanwhile, did little to explain Black Studies as a scholarly enterprise. In fairness, that was to some degree because the concept was so new there really wasn't a clear and widely shared definition of what Black Studies was, or where it fit into the scheme of academic disciplines. But it was also because journalism seldom does that sort of explanation well. Or rather, journalism seldom does that sort of explanation. And I say that after a 20-year career in journalism. You can see it today in the journalistic coverage of the presidential election campaign. Far more time and attention is given to the horse race reporting of who is ahead at any given moment than to the policy positions of the candidates and the implications of those policies for American citizens should one or another of them end up getting elected. Journalism gravitates toward conflict and tends to portray that conflict in terms of winners and losers. In the late 1960s, there was conflict galore, and the debate over Black Studies was just one of them. When the turmoil began to fade in the mid-1970s and the revolution the black students had called for so loudly appeared to have faded too, it became easy for most journalists and many academicians, as well as the public in general, to dismiss Black Studies as a passing and inconsequential political fancy. That attitude, of course, not only ignored how thoroughly intertwined politics is with all scholarly pursuits, but also gave only superficial attention to the intellectual challenges with which Black Studies confronted higher education. On one level, that is understandable because the political assault on higher education embodied in the Black Studies movement was so powerful and emotionally charged. Black Studies always was and remains today intensely political. But Black Studies has always been about something more. It has always been about awareness. Awareness of how narrow and limiting our accepted assumptions about the world can be. The battle over black studies was not merely about pacifying angry black students with promises that more black students will be enrolled, more black faculty will be hired, and more African American authors will be added to the approved literary canon and course syllabi. All of those issues were involved. But at its core, the real battle was about what it meant for African Americans to be full and accepted part of the scholarly enterprise. That question generated enormous, intense, and passionate debates over difficult and sensitive issues. What is Black Studies? Is Black Studies a legitimate academic discipline? Who is qualified to teach Black Studies? What role, if any, should Black Studies have in programs aimed at economic, political, social, and cultural development in the off-campus Black community? Does the creation of Black Studies programs advance the participation of African Americans in higher education? Or does it merely establish an academic ghetto that marginalizes African Americans, their history, their culture, and their concerns, and assures that they will not be taken seriously by institutions of higher education? To a great extent, however, such questions and the heated debates that surrounded them obscured an even deeper impact of the Black Studies movement. Black Studies opened up the university by confronting it with a powerful critique of what the university was and what its purpose should be. Black Studies challenged the university to reconsider other crucial questions. What and who constitute knowledge? How is knowledge organized? Does specialization produce knowledge that is increasingly abstract and sterile? Or alternatively, is a broad interdisciplinary approach to knowledge even possible in an age when our base of information is expanding exponentially? What is the purpose of seeking knowledge? Do pragmatic concerns inevitably taint the purity of intellectual pursuits? Or do scholars have a moral responsibility to work for the improvement of the society in which they live? The Black Studies movement was not an aberration caused by the political and social turmoil of the 1960s. Rather, it was a part of a long continuum of institutional transformation wrought by internal and external tensions that had been dramatically reshaping American universities for more than a century before Black Studies programs appeared on the scene. In 1930, for example, the scholar Abraham Flexner chided American colleges and universities for their steadily increasing enrollments. If Abraham Flexner had his way, almost none of you would be here. Keep in mind that in the 1930s, fewer than 15% of people of what we consider normal college age, 18 to 22-year-olds, went on to college. 15%. Go back and look at your class picture from high school. How many of your high school graduating classmates gone on to college in one way or another? Thought that they would scandalize Flexner. Not only that, but he wasn't happy about the way institutions were increasing their emphasis on such distastefully practical trappings as business, nursing, and journalism schools. Saw no place for those in the university. Now, nearly a century earlier, however, Ralph Waldo Emerson had urged scholars just as passionately as Flexner had to embrace the idea that intellectual inquiry and practical action were not only not antithetical, but were mutually beneficial. Black Studies continued that debate and transformation, opening up the university to new possibilities and providing an inspirational model for similar programs, such as women's studies, Chicano or Latino studies, Native American studies, and others that quickly followed. I recall it was a couple of years ago, Dennis Banks, one of the founders of the American Indian movement, was here on campus. And when he spoke, he talked about the way in which Native American activists, folks who were starting AIM, were looking very much to what black students were doing. They started demanding similar programs at colleges and universities. I believe that transformation has helped produce a subtle but pivotal revolution in consciousness, whereby we no longer discuss race in America strictly in terms of black and white, which was common throughout the 1960s and well beyond. We are no longer, as a society, even comfortable with what David Hollinger has called the ethno-racial pentagon, the demographic categories of black, white, Hispanic, Native American, and Asian, that until relatively recently have been pretty much standard since the 1970s. You will have noticed, I'm sure, when you applied here, that I believe on applications they still have those various categories, although the range of categories has widened out in recent years. That is an artifact of the 1960s. Still with us. According to Hollinger, we are moving toward a post-ethnic America, where racial and ethnic boundaries are increasingly blurred, and affiliation with racial and ethnic identity is increasingly a matter of choice. If that is so, Hollinger makes a pretty strong case. I believe that the shift in cultural consciousness is, in significant part, the result of the challenges black students, black studies presented at the university in the late 1960s. The Black Studies movement forced the university, the intellectual engine of society, to open up the American mind to new perspectives on higher education and the American society, and to new visions of what the future might hold for both. Black Studies forced white institutions and their white administrators to look beyond old models of integration and assimilation, to confront radical ideas about the true nature of existing institutions and the scope of change required to make those institutions serve the entire American community. Many of the advocates of black studies saw themselves engaged in a revolution of black empowerment, and many of their demands on educational institutions were cast in fiery and rebellious rhetoric that often castigated and called for the destruction of existing institutional forms. They demanded that students have significant influence and sometimes complete control over programs. They demanded in some cases that black studies departments or centers engage in programs of direct service to nearby black communities off campus. Such demands seemed beyond the pale to many university administrators and the politicians who were watching and criticizing over their shoulders. The students' rhetoric, the revolutionary rhetoric, was accompanied often by impassioned demonstrations, like the Cornell incident. Small wonder that revolutionary rhetoric, confrontation, and violence came in the minds of many, and not just whites, to define the Black Studies movement. This was the political challenge, dramatic and visceral, that Black Studies presented, questioning in some cases whether university administrations would be able to continue governing their institutions. This was the challenge that captured media attention and dominated the public discourse. This is what I call taking my cue from a famous poem by the African-American writer and musician Gil Scott-Heron, The Televised Revolution.